How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud, Daf 10 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, Daf 10 is Mamash Gavalt. Daf 10 is a journey to understand why Kometz must be done with the right hand. As we learned in our Mishnah, that one of the psuls by qemitzah is if the Kometz is taken with the left hand. We saw the opinion of Ben Beseira that Nish Geferlech, you could just put the Kometz back into the mixing bowl and just do it over with your right hand. But the Mishnah was clear that the Kometz must be scooped up with the Kohen's right hand. We are going to go on a journey to understand why that is. Why do I call it a journey? I call it a journey because it's going to have twists and turns. We're going to learn it out one way, another way, both ways, but it's all in service of this same question of how do we know that the Kometz must be scooped up with the Kohen's right hand? So therefore, on today's daf, there really is just one topic, and that is our topic, learning the right hand requirement for qemitzah. So friends, come along with me on this journey and let us jump in. What do they say? A journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. So we're going to take the first step now. Friends, we begin on Daf Tes Amid Beis, about 10 or so lines from the bottom of Tes Amid Beis at the two dots, Komatz Bisbol V'chule. Our Mishnah had said that if one were to scoop up the Kometz, if the Kohen were to scoop up the Kometz with his left hand, it would be puzzle. Well, I'm getting like strong like hammer knocking against stone vibes, like digging out a mountain. They seem to always be going in the morning. I hear it, I feel it. It's like thumping. Okay, let's go weiter. Shouldn't distract me though. Anyways, so we had learned in our Mishnah that one of the psuls is if the Kohen uses his left hand, he's got to use the right hand. Menan Emili, how do we know this? Asks the Gemara. Here we go. Amar Bzera to Amar Cross. Says Bzera because the pasuk says, okay, friends, on this daf, we are going to be referencing the purification of the Mitzorah quite a lot and in detail. I feel like the Mitzorah's purification has been coming up quite a bit, which I think is good because it's such a detailed thing, and it's Parshas Mitzorah, and it's one of those things in the Torah that are very detailed, and I guess the more we learn about it, the more of a chance we have to actually understand it and remember it. So I'm actually okay that we keep on referencing the purification of the Mitzorah as detailed as it is. So we're going to be referencing the purification of Mitzorah quite a bit today. So Amar Bzer the pasuk says Vayakre v'samincha v'imale kapo mimeno. That this is a pasuk from the Chanukas HaMishkan in the, I think, first aliyah maybe of Parshas Shmini. At the Chanukas HaMishkan, Moshe tells Aharon that he should scoop up the Kometz from the Mincha, and it says Vayakrevis HaMincha that Aharon offered the Korban Mincha Vayimale Kapo Mimeno, and he filled up his palm with the Mincha, i.e., he took a Kometz. Now the thing is, this kaf, right, Vayimale Kapo, his palm, right, he filled up his Kometz with flour. Which Kometz? His right palm? I don't know why I'm struggling to define that word kaf. Kaf is a palm, I think, right? Okay, well, anyways, that's what a kometz is, right? You take three fingers and kind of squish whatever fits between the three fingers in your palm. So whatever, basically means his hand, the palm of his hand. But which palm of his hand? The right palm of his hand or the left palm of his hand? That's what we need to figure out. Kavzen yodea ma'u. I don't know what this palm is. Right? Left? Kishu omer. Okay. So when it comes to the purification of the Mitzorah, okie dokie. So of course, as we know already, because we've been referencing the purification of the Mitzorah quite a bit, I think. So of course, as part of the purification of the Mitzorah, he brings in asham, and it is the blood of that korban asham that is put on the Mitzorah's bahonis, and then on top of that blood is essentially then put oil, right? Then they have a log of oil. So it's sprinkled 7 times towards the heichal, and then the oil is also placed on the Mitzora's Bahonis. Now, when it comes to a Mitzora, there are the korbanos of the Mitzora adapt based on what the Mitzora can afford. Right? This is another example. I don't know if there are other examples. I think it may just be these two. If anybody can think of any other examples, let us know. Right? There's of course the korban ola v'yored, which we learned about Masechta Shavuos, for Shavuos Bitoy, Shavuos Ha'edus, and Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashav. There's the korban ola v'yored. And also when it comes to the Mitzora, based on what the Mitzora can afford, he will either bring exclusively animal offerings, a chatas, an ola, and an asham, all animals. Now, if he's unable to afford that, what he will bring is still an asham. You still need to bring the asham because we need that blood from the asham, that whole purification process with the blood and the oil. The asham still needs to be an animal. But the chatas and the ola can be birds. You could bring birds instead of animals. Now, the Torah, in describing this, basically goes through the whole purification process of a Mitzora twice. Once for what the Gemara refers to as an Ashir, and the other one as an Ani, right? A wealthy Mitzora and a poor Mitzora. A Mitzora who can afford animals, and a Mitzora who cannot afford animals, who instead offers birds. The Torah basically explains the whole process with the blood and the bahonis and the oil and everything for a wealthy Mitzora, and does the whole process all over again, describes the whole process Nachamol for a Mitzora who's an Ani, for a Mitzora who can't afford the animals. Which means, what's the point? The point is that we tend to have descriptors a whole bunch of times, including that when it comes to the wealthy Mitzora, it says that the Kohen, who's kind of managing the purification process, so it says that, and the Mishnah in Masechta Negoim, the last parak of Masechta Negoim, the Mishnah describes that you'll have one Kohen who pours the oil into the palm, the left palm of another Kohen. So it says there that the oil is poured into the left palm of the Kohen. That's in one pasuk. And then the next pasuk says how that Kohen, with the oily palms, will take his right finger and dip it into the oil that's once again in his left palm. So it mentions left twice. It mentions the left palm when the oil is being poured into it, and it mentions the left palm a second time when the finger is being put into it in order to be able to, I think that was for the, I don't know my chumash, but I probably have the psukim over here. That is for, what do we got here? Yeah, so that is for the sprinkling of the oil towards the heichal. Now, so we just described these two smoles, right? The left hand that it's poured into and the left hand that it's dipped into, the same left hand, obviously. And it says this again by the poor Mitzora, meaning that it mentions the left hand specifically 4 times, twice by the Asher, twice by the Ani, when it comes to the purification of a Mitzora. Now, back in our Gemara, so Kav Zeni Yodea Maus, when it comes to qemitzah, when it talks about Aharon taking a kometz with his kaf, is this his right kaf, his right palm, or his left palm? So Kshu when it says by the purification of the Mitzora, V'lokach hakoin milog ashemen, v'yotzak al kaf hakoin asmalis, when one koin will take from the log measure of oil and pour it onto the kaf, onto the palm of another kohen, hasmol is the left. So here it specifically says we're talking about the left palm. So kan smolis, so we want to make a drasha that here when it comes to Mitzora is where we're talking about the left palm. Hakol makom shenemar kaf eno ela yamin. But any other instance of kaf will be the right hand. Right? We're saying we're specifying by Mitzora the left hand, which means that by default we'd be talking about the right hand, which is why by Mitzora we have to specify that we're talking about the left hand. Okay, fine. Legufe, to which Gemara says, wait 1 second. We're not yet ready for drushes, right? We said that small left shows up 4 times when it comes to the Torah. The first of those 4 is needed simply to teach it that we're using the left hand over here, not to teach anything about any other case, about qemitzah, about nothing else. This just is teaching us that when it comes to the purification of the metzora, the oil goes on the left hand. So we say, okay, no big deal. It says left. Again, in the very next pasuk, it talks about how he dips his right finger in his left hand. And so therefore, okay, fine. So the first left is to teach us that it's his left hand. Okay, why do I need to say left hand again? So when it says the left hand the second time, it's to say, here we need your left hand, but any other place where we're talking about hands, we're talking about right hands. Therefore, when it comes to the kometz, we're talking about Aharon taking a kometz with his right hand. The Gemara says, wait, but 1 second. There is a principle that a double negative is a positive. And therefore, maybe the first pasuk, when it says small, means that the oil is poured in the kohen's left hand. And then the second time when it says small, it's meaning the first time it means left as opposed to right. And then the second time we also say left as opposed to right. But maybe by excluding right twice, we're actually coming to say, you know what? Actually, you can even use a miut achar miut el rabos, that a double negative makes a positive by specifying twice the left hand. Maybe it's actually coming to include that you can even do this avoda with your right hand, that the oil can even be poured into the right hand. Smol sachrin ksiv kan. So ksiv. Well, it says smolis, it says left a third time, and if it's miut achar miut, so then all you would need is twice. The fact that the Torah then says smolis a third time, we're already moving into the purification of a poor mitzora. So now that it says smolis a third time, we're no longer talking about miut achar miut, and therefore it is kan smolis vein acher smolis. It means that here by mitzora we're talking about the left hand, but by other cases like qemitzah, we're talking about the right hand. The ema adraba. Maybe I'll say 1 second. Makan smolis ab be'alma nami smolis. Maybe instead of being exclusionary, exclusive, let's be inclusive. Instead of saying here you're using your left hand, and in other places you're using your right hand, why don't we instead make it like a binyan that just like over here we're using your left hand, where the Torah specifies by mitzora it's the left hand, it's to say that not just here, but actually all places when it talks about hands, it's talking about the left hand. So maybe the kometz should also be the left hand. So the Gemara says, no. Arba'a smolis ksive, treba aniv, treba asher. Look, it says left, it specifies left hand in the purification process of a mitzora 4 times. Right? If we wanted to say, as Rashi points out, if we wanted to say that just like here we're talking about the left hand, therefore also by other cases like qemitzah, we're also talking about the left hand, well then it would just need to say left 3 times, right? First time for itself, to teach that it's the left hand by mitzvah. The second time, if we had a second time, I may have said miut achar miut to rabos to say you can even use your right hand. So now we have a third time. Okay. So now the third time means that we're not going to say miut achar miut. Now we have the question. So does it mean to say that just like it's the left hand by mitzvah, it's also left hand by other cases? Or is we're saying no, it's the left hand only by mitzvah, not by other cases? Well, we could have stopped there, but now we have even a 4th left hand to say, you know what? This requirement for left hand is here. We're concentrating 4 times, we're saying it. We're concentrating on mitzora. Mitzora is a left hand gig. Other things like kometz is not a left hand gig, it's a right hand gig. So that is step 1 or phase 1 of our journey in understanding how we know that the kometz is with the right hand. The answer is that, well, basically the Torah invests quite a bit in drilling in the notion that by the purification of mitzora, the oil is in the kohen's left hand to the exclusion of other scenarios, and therefore the kometz is not going to be kometz with the left hand, rather it's going to be kometz with the right hand. That is phase 1 of understanding why the kometz must be scooped up with the Kohen's right hand. Now, as I had said, we're really going to get into the nitty gritty of the psukim regarding the purification of a mitzvah. It says Rabbi Yirmiyah to Reb Zera, Al boen yadu ayamonis, val boen raglo ayamonis, dichsiv lomali. Okay. You see, the Torah says, right, because we get into this, right? Yeah. Okay. So, maybe I should have brought a chumash, but I don't need a chumash, maybe it's even better without it. We'll just talk about it outside. So, when it comes to the purification of the mitzvah, so really the bulk of, it's like, really most of the psukim are talking about the asham. After the asham, it says, okay, and then he slaughters the chatas, and he slaughters the ola, you're basically done. A few words about the mincha that he's offering with the olah. But anyways, the majority of the psukim there are talking about the asham, because that you have the blood, you have the bahonis, you have the oil, all that stuff. Now here's the thing: when it comes to the blood of the asham, so there it already says that the blood is going to be put on the right bahonis of the mitzorah, right, on the tnuch, on his right tnuch in his ear. That's like the cartilage in the middle of the ear. The blood of the mitzorah. The blood of the asham is going to be put on the mitzorah's right ear. Now, the mitzorah is not actually allowed to go into the azar. He's not technically mitzorah anymore. He's a mechusar kippurim. Now, he's not allowed to go into the azara. So, he's got to stand that Shar Nicanor, and he's got to stick his head in, and they'll put some blood on his ear, and then he sticks his finger in, he puts the blood on his finger, and sticks his toe, and he puts the blood on his toe. Anyways, so basically the oil is being put on the same exact spots as the blood has already been put. Now, when it comes to the blood of the asham, the Torah says, okay, we need to know what do you do with this blood? Okay, you're going to put it on the tnuch of his ear, and on the bone of around his right thumb, and the bone of his right foot, right, his right thumb toe. So basically on the cartilage of his right ear, his right thumb, and his right thumb toe. That's where the blood goes. And what else did the Pesukim say? The blood also says, Al Mukom Dam Asham, that when it comes to the oil, it says that the oil is going to be placed where the blood of the Asham was placed. But you know what else it says by the oil? Once again, it says, on the tnuch of his ear, on the right, on the cartilage of his ear, on his right thumb, on his right toe. Why? We already said the cartilage of the ear, the right thumb, the right toe by the blood of the asham, and we already have a pasuk that says that the oil is going to be put where the blood was put. That should be enough information. I don't need the specification of the cartilage of his right ear, his right thumb, and his right thumb toe. Those are extra. So again, so says the Gemara, that when the pasuk says by the mitzorah, that the oil is put on his right thumb, and his right thumb toe. Why do I need that? Because after all, the Pesukim are already saying that the oil is going wherever the blood was. So just find the blood and put the oil there. I don't need to specify the right thumb toe. It's wherever the blood was, which, yes, was the right thumb toe. We don't need to double up on that. I'll tell you why. One is to say that I think the point is, right, okay, yeah, I think the point is that, well, I know what the point is, but basically, so it says it by the ani and by the usher, right? So I think that one of them is coming to, so you could say, I think maybe you could say, right, like, because what does it say? Bein biyad, bein rogil. I think maybe this is the point. Well, I know what the point is. the technical, the devil's in the details on this stuff. Anyways, so it says boen by the oil of a wealthy mitzvah and by the oil of a poor mitzvah. It says the boen yad. And again, why do we need the boen yad? We already know that the blood was there. So it says boen yad once to say that it could be on the sides, right? So meaning it says al. What it says? It says, Mieser Hashem Asher al Kabo Yitain Agon al Tunuch Ozena Mitaer Yemanis Va'al Bo and Yoda Yemanis Va'al Bo and Ragla Yemanis. I might think that specifically, so al, the thumb, would be like the thumbnail. Maybe the blood, maybe the oil, I guess in this case, would have to dafka be on the thumbnail. What about the sides of the thumb? So we're saying also al boin yad to say that it could also be the side. And then I think the point is that would be, let's say, by the wealthy mitzora. And then when it says it again by the poor mitzora, it's saying to the exclusion that it has to dafka be the sides, but not the under, right? So like if you imagine putting your hand flat on a table, the under of your finger would be the side of your finger that is touching flat on the table. That's the underside of the finger. So you can't put the oil there. Okay? So we're saying that, so al bo and raglo yado would mean on the fingernail of the thumb. Now, I would already know to put it on the fingernail of the thumb because we're putting it wherever the blood was. So why say al boen again? To say that not just on the fingernail on the top, but also on the sides. Okay? And why say it not just by the usher, but also by the ani? To say not just on the sides, but also underneath. It's saying just on the sides to the exclusion of underneath. Kilu dafka has to be the sides that are allowed, but not the sides of the sides, i.e. not the bottom, not underneath. And then it does this for the thumb of your hand as well. It does it the same process for the thumb of your thumb toe as well. That it could be on the nail on the sides, but not on the bottom. So that is what we're learning out from the additional boen yads and boen regels of the wealthy and poor mitzoras when it comes to the oil, even though we wouldn't need that because it already says you're putting it wherever you put the blood. Okay, so chad la'achshir tzadin, one is to allow the sides of the thumb, michad lifsol tzidei tzadin, the other one, I think when we say one is kilu, the one by the ashir would be to include the sides, and the one by the ani would be to exclude the sides, and we have one by the thumb of the hand, and then we have the same process by the thumb of the toe. I hope that is correct. I mean, the principle is the same, right? You could do the sides and the bottom. It's a technicality of, is it learning out from the thumb of the hand and the thumb of the toe, or from the thumb of the hand of the ani and the thumb of the hand of the mitzvah? The reason why I think it's that way is because Rashi says chad al bohen, one al bohen, bein diyad, bein de regel. Whether we're talking about the bohen of the yad, whether we're talking about the bohen of the regel, is for the sides, and one of the bohens, whether the yad, whether the regel. So it sounds like, I hope I'm understanding correctly. Anyways, that's really a detail, but the principle remains the same. Sides okay, bottom not okay. Now, when the pasuk says al dam ha'asham, al mekom dam ha'asham, by the wealthy mitzora, it says al dam ha'asham, and by the poor mitzora, it says al mekom dam ha'asham. Slightly different. One says on the blood of the, right, because you already by the time of the oil, you have already applied the blood of the asham. So now one pasuk, so the pasuk says by the ashir al dam ha'asham, that the oil is being placed on the blood of the asham, and by the poor mitzvah it says al makom, on the place of the dam of the asham. Lemay asu, what's the difference between these? Lemay asu hani tzriche, I don't know, or maybe it's hani tzriche. Ikaz rachmana al dama asham. If it only had said on the blood of the asham, so I would think it literally has to be put on the blood. What if he wiped off the blood at that point? Havamina isei in, if the blood is still there, yes, put the oil on. Niskaneach, but if the blood was cleared off, low, then you wouldn't put on the oil because it's not being put on the blood if it was already cleaned off. So kasvachmana al mekom, that's why the next pasuk it says on the place of the blood. Even if the blood itself isn't there, but you could still put the oil on the place where the blood was, because of rachmana al mekom. And if we would only have the pasuk it says on the place where the blood was, havamina davka niskaneach, I would think you davka have to clear off the blood and then put on the oil. Aval isei, but if the blood was still there, I might think that it's actually a chatzitza. You want it to be on the place of the blood, not actually on the blood. Kamashman al dama asham. Therefore, we have the first pasuk as well of on the blood of the asham. that you can even put it on the blood itself. So either way is fine. If the blood is there, put the oil on the blood of the asham. If the blood was wiped off, you could put the blood on the place where the asham, you could put the oil on the place where the blood was before it was wiped off, on the place of the blood of the asham. Okay, Givaldi. Okay, friends, now we take our first twist and turn. Now our journey takes its first turn. Up until now, how do we know that the kometz has to be taken with the kohen's right hand? We said, well, because the Torah invested so much in specifying that it's the left hand for the mitzorah, to say that that is specific to the mitzorah, but by the kometz, it's not the left hand, it's the right hand. Now, here we take our first turn. Rava says, al dam ha'asham, v'amakom dam ha'asham. Okay, getting back on sort of continuing on the analyzing the details of these psukim of the purification of the mitzorah. So again, we already had all of the information that we needed by the blood of the asham. Right? You have the blood of the asham. It goes on the cartilage of the ear, on the thumb of the hand, the thumb of the toes. We got all the information, and we already said that you're going to put the oil on the same place where the blood went. So why does the Torah need to specify by the oil, not just the thumb of the hand and the thumb of the toe? We said why we need the thumb of the hand and the thumb of the toe, to tell us the top, right? Also the sides, not the bottom. Okay, fine. But why do you have to say that it's the right hand and the right toe? Because we already said that by the asham, and that's where the blood is. So obviously, right or left, well, the blood's on the right one, so you're going to go on the right one. So why do you have to specify by the oil that it's on the right thumb and the right thumb toe? I mean, we know that because that's where the blood is. And sure, we needed alboin in order to teach us the sides, not the bottom, whatever. But yemanis, that seems to be unnecessary. So again, Amar Rava says, Rava, since the pasuk already says about the oil, al dam asham, v'amakom dam asham, that the oil is going to be placed on the blood of the asham or in the place where the blood of the asham was, either one of those, but that's where the oil is going. Uchsiva yemanis badam, and it says already by the blood of the asham that we're talking about the right ear, thumb toe. The al makom dam, where am I? Chsiva yemanis badam. So al boin yadoy hayemanis val boin ragla yemanis. So when it says this is by the blood, yeah, meaning it's explaining, right? Meaning it says, right? I'm just backing up a minute. It says by the blood, the right, as it says al boin yadoy yemanis val boin ragla yemanis. Okay. And even though it already said the right thumb toe by the blood of the asham, it nonetheless specified that you're going to put the oil on the right thumb and the right thumb toe by a wealthy mitzorah, and did it again by the poor mitzorah. Why? We already said we're putting the oil where the blood was. Leave out the fact that it's the right one. We know it's the right one. That's where the blood was. Lamali, how come it's mentioning the right ones? Elo Amar Rava. Okay, here comes, so rather says Rava, this is what we do with all this rightness. And this is going to be a replacement for the original theory that we had for why the kometz needs to be with the right hand. And that is, Elo Amar Rava, yad qemitzah. Rather, we're making some gezerah shavas here. The reason why it says right by the oil of a mitzorah is so that we can make a gezerah shava to kometz. That it says hand by the behonis, by the mitzorah, and by the mitzorah, by the oil, it says right hand, even though it doesn't need to say right, but it does say right by the mitzorah, and that yimanis is available for a gezerah shava. And it says by kometz, hand. Technically, it doesn't actually say hand, it says kaf, which is interesting because it's technically a different word. And we recently had a situation, right, with avono, and we didn't want to make the gezerah shava avono and avon. Of course, there's a famous example of uva v'shava kohen, uva kohen, different words. Anyways, here We seem to be using different words, yad and kaf. But anyways, we have a gezerah shava, and that's how we learn out the right hand by the kometz. That it says yad by the mitzora, and by the mitzora it also says yimanis, which is extra, to be available for gezerah shava, to teach that also by the qemitzah, which is also with one's hand, with the kohen's hand, that's going to be also with the right hand. So this is a replacement for the earlier drasha. We're gonna have to explain then why it says small 4 times if it's not to teach anything about using the right hand by kometz. But anyways, says Rave that the reason why a kohen kometzes with the right hand is because of this gezerah shava using the extra yamanis from mitzora. Regel l'chalitza. And when it says that the bowen of the regel, we're talking about the right bowen of the regel. So that's also for gezerah shava to yivamis. If I had to ask you right now, if I gave you a magical wand, you could wave the wand and we'll just switch to learning yivamis. Would you do it? Or are you just gonna be like, no, we're already in Menachos, let's just go for it. Also, there's big shilas, right? If we wave that wand and we go back to Yavamis, does that mean that we just went back 4 years? Or 3 years, whatever it is? And we'd have to do all of Nashim and all of Nezikin over again? It's an interesting question. Akoponim. So, by Chalitza, right, it says, V'cholza na'alo me'araglo. I think it says that the Yavama removes the shoe from the Yavam, and we're talking about the right shoe, because of Abon Yado Ayamanis, the Yamanis is extra, and we learn out gezerah shava regel for Yavamis to take off we're talking about the right shoe. Ozen Liritzia, and when it says the right cartilage of the ear, which is also extra, it's available for gezerah shava for a doorman. For a doorman. What's a doorman? Everybody who's been at Babble on Talmud for a few years knows what a doorman is. A doorman is an Eved Ivri who at the end of his term decides, Ahavti es Adoni ves ishti ves bonai lo eitzi chavshi. I think something like that. A Eved Ivri who at the end of his 6 years says, wait, I like it here. It's good here. I want to stay. So the master, the Adon, takes the Eved Ivri to his door, and he takes a nail, and he nails his ear to the door, and he leaves him there until the Yovel, and he is now a doorman. So now, when making a doorman, that is, we nail him to the door through his right ear. We take a nail and we knock right through his right ear, and we say, I'll be back at Yovel. Fighter. Ozen Liritzia. Fine. Right ear. Zil. Givaldik. So Rava basically just came with his perspective here. That's the new turn in our journey, which is that as of now, actually, the reason why the kometz is with the right hand is because of a gezerah shava yad from mitzora, because there's the extra yumanis. So now the Gemara asks, smolis lemai also. So this is talking about, okay, so of course it says smolis 4 times. We're just going to focus for now on the ashir. Okay, so the ashir, the first time it says smolis is to say that, well, by the oil of the mitzora, it's going to be the left hand of the coin, not the right hand. It's going to be the left hand. Now, so the second instance of smol by the oil of the mitzora is to say that not only do you use the left hand of the coin for the oil of the mitzora, but that the right hand is puzzle. Shalotomas, that you shouldn't say, umabimakom shelo nisra besmol nisra beyamin, that if by the kometz, for example, where all that is included is the right hand. The small is not, he doesn't do kometz with his left hand. He only does kometz with his right hand. So magum shenis rabismo. So I might think that when it comes to the oil of the mitzora, where the kohen uses, right, puts the oil in his left hand, certainly he should also be able to use his right hand, right? If in a place by the kometz where only one hand is allowed, and that's the right hand, certainly when the left hand is even allowed, certainly the right hand should be allowed as well. Therefore, we need a second small to say no, to drive the point home and say, don't make that kal v'chomer, left hand only for the oil of the mitzvah, that the oil of the log shemen goes in the left hand of the kohen, not the right hand. V'idach smolis. And what about the fact that also by the oil of the poor mitzvah, it also says smolis twice. There's a gears that skips the next few words. I'm tempted to skip it. Yeah, related to the initial drasha with the top and the sides. Anyways, okay, lemai asa. What do you do with the additional smalls by the ani? Why did we have to double down? Right. Well, what are those doing there? Right. We had said that the first one, right, the first of the four is to say that it's the left hand. The second of the four is to say it must be the left hand, not the right hand. What's the deal with 3 and 4? Right, we counted for 1 and 2. What about 3 and 4? There's the Tana of Rabbi Shmuel, like taught by the Academy of Rabbi Shmuel. Kol parsha shenemra v'nishnes, that whenever you have a parsha that is said once and then repeated, like we have by the purification of the rich and poor ani, lo nishnes ela b'shvil davar shenis, but there's a reason why it's doubled. There's going to be some kind of chiddush. So yes, the whole parsha is doubled. Yes, we're talking about all the same things by the wealthy mitzvah. We repeat again by the poor mitzvah, but that's because there's a chiddush here, and that is the, what does he say here? Rashi says ufajaz ani nischadish korban ola v'yored. The fact that it's a korban ola v'yored, the fact that there, this is relatively rare, right? I think that there's only 2 examples of this in the Torah. We have the korban ola v'yored in Perek Hey of Parshas Vayikra that we learned about in Masechta Shavuos, and we're saying here also by the ani, by the Mitzvah. I think this is the 14th chapter of Vayikra, right? We pointed out recently how learning Kachim has really drilled in what the different prakim of Sefer Vayikra are talking about. So this is the 14th chapter of Sefer Vayikra, the beginning of Parshas Mitzvah, and it's doubling down, right? Saying it has the parsha of the wealthy Mitzvah and repeats the parsha of the poor mitzvah in order to teach the chiddush of the fact that there's this 2-tiered purification based on what is affordable to the mitzvah. And that is why we repeat the details, not for any particular chiddush. Well, yes, not for any particular chiddush about the small thing, but about bigadol, the chiddush about the fact that there's a 2-tiered purification process for a mitzvah. Rab Bar Chana Reb Shimon ben Lakish. Says Rab Bar Chana and Reb Shimon ben Lakish. Komakom shenemra etzba. We've seen this before, at least variations of it. Yeah, we've seen it before. Komakom shenemra etzba vikuna eina ela yamin. That if you have a pasuk, and we'll give examples shortly. If you have a pasuk that says etzba, finger, and also says kohen, kehuna, right, a word related to priesthood, in that pasuk, both etzba and kohen, and el yamin, it means you got to use your right hand. Okay, so moving into now new territory for how we know about the right hand of for a kometz. So I may have thought to say etzba vikuna ba'inon. So I may have thought to say, sounds like what we're saying is that the pasuk needs to say both etzba and kehuna in order for there to be a right hand requirement. Kidichsiv, as the pasuk says, by, what is it? V'lokach hakohen midam achatos be'etzba'o. V'gomer, okay, this is by a korban chatos, of course. It's by a korban chatos, but this is by the Sa'ir Nasi specifically by the goat of a Nasi that we had already learned about 2 Masechtas ago, Masechta Horius, a Masechta that I did not expect to be as difficult as it was. as y'all know, I'm struggling to get these dafs out on time. I was hoping way back in Horius to catch up from Avodah Zarah. I figured, how hard can it be? It's just basically Rashi. Oof, was I mistaken? It only got harder in Zvachim, and here we are, recording what was unthinkable for like 6 years. Here I am just recording and uploading, racing to keep up with the Daf Yomi schedule. Anyways, the pasuk says by the Sa'ir Nasi, V'lokach hakohen midam hachatos be'etzba'o, that the kohen will take from the blood of the chatos be'etzba'o with his finger. V'gomer mitzorah, and we learn out from mitzorah, d'chsiv v'toval hakohen es etzba'o ayamanis, and by the, where is this, the blood, the oil, what is this? The oil. By the oil of a mitzorah, it says, v'toval hakohen es etzba'o ayamanis. So we see etzba, we see kohen, and we see right. So whenever it says etzba and kohen, it means the right hand. But hare qemitzah, but what about qemitzah? What about kometz? The lo ksiva ba ela kahuna. Right? The pasuk by kometz, it just says v'kometz hakohen. It doesn't say anything about a finger. It says kahuna, but it doesn't say anything about the finger. V'tanan. And we learned in our Mishnah, kometz b'small pasul, that if you take a kometz with your left hand, it's pasul. So, i.e., by a kometz, there is a requirement for the right hand, even though it says kahuna, but no etzba. On my Rava, says Rava, o etzba, o kahuna. Actually, it could be either. So if the pasuk says either finger or even kahuna, so then there's a requirement for the right hand. And therefore, now this is now a third explanation for why we need the right hand for the kometz. Because it says v'kometz hakohen, and because it says kahuna, it means the right hand. Abaye says to Rave, Hare holacha sivarim lekevesh. What about every day in the Beis Hamikdash? They would have the korban tamid, and it's the korban olah that they would cut up into pieces. And the Mishnayos in Masechta Tamid describe how the Kohanim would carry the pieces, the parts of the sheep over to the ramp of the Mizbeach. And it describes that one of the Kohanim would be holding the head of the sheep in his right hand and the right leg of the sheep in his left hand. So it says kohen there. It says the kohen will offer everything on the mizbeach. We say Masechta Tamid. We say that this is taking the limbs of the korban over to the ramp of the mizbeach. V'tanan, and we learned in the Mishnah in Masechta Tamid, haregel shel yamin bismol, that one of the kohen would have the head of the sheep in his right hand and the leg of the sheep in his left hand. So we see that, right, ubeis or lachutz, and the skin was facing outward, so that you wouldn't have like like where the leg was cut off from facing outward. That wouldn't be so nice. Okay, now, I think where the skin would have been, because I think at this point it was probably already skinned. But anyways, we see that the pasuk by the Talmud says kohen, and yet we're using the left hand to carry the leg. When we say that if the pasuk says either finger or kihuna, then you got to use your right hand. That's specifically things that are necessary for the kapara. Something like the kometz. Something like applying the blood of by the Sa'ir Nasi, applying the blood to the corners of the mizbeach, right? Things that are necessary for part of the kapara. So if it says either finger or kohen, it means you got to use your right hand. Okay, so a third explanation for how we know that the kometz of a mincha is with your right hand, because it says v'kometz hakohen, and the kometz, of course, is necessary for the kapara, and therefore it would have to be the right hand. Now, the Gemara, Vare Kabbalah. What about Kabbalah Sadam? Davar Ma'akiv Kaparahu. Of course, that's one of the important avodas of of animal sacrifice. Shchita, Kabbalah, Halacha, Zrika, as we know from Masechta Zvachim. V'chosav ba kihuna, and it says kihuna dechsev ve'ekrivu b'nei Aharon akohanim esadam, so Kabbalah sadam. When it says ve'ekrivu b'nei Aharon akohanim, that's talking about Kabbalah sadam. So Kabbalah sadam is necessary for kapara. It also, the pasuk says kohanim. And yet v'tnan, we learn in a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Masechta Zvachim. Kiba b'smol pasal, that if the Kabbalah Sadam was done in the Kohen's left hand, pasal. Reb Shimon machshir, and Reb Shimon says it's kosher, even if the Kabbalah Sadam was in the left hand. But based on our principle that if it says kihuna, you got to use your right hand. How could Reb Shimon say that it's kosher with your left hand? The Reb Shimon comment. One second, you asked me a kasha specifically from Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon tarte bai. Reb Shimon requires both kihuna and etzba, and therefore, since it only talks about kihuna in that pasuk, he doesn't require the right hand. Umi bai Reb Shimon tarte. Does Reb Shimon in fact require both kihuna and etzba? V'atani, we learn in the Brayso Reb Shimon. Almost says Reb Shimon, kol makom shenemra yad enu ela yamin, etzba enu ela yamin. Whenever it says only yad or only etzba, that is enough to mean the right hand. So don't tell me that he needs etzba and kahuna. Etzba lo baya kahuna, kahuna baya etzba. Okay, rather, look, etzba alone, according to Reb Shimon, means the right hand. But kahuna alone does not mean the right hand. It would need kahuna and etzba. Kohen lamali, well, if at the end of the day, kahuna is not enough on its own, you need etzba. So really, the star of the show is etzba. Then why do you need kahuna? B'chihuno, meaning that he has to be, when it says kahuna, it means that he has to be wearing big day kihuna. Okay, fine. So basically, Reb Shimon says that if it says etzba or yad, so that means right hand. But if it says kahuna, that is not enough to require the right hand. Okay, beseder. Very zrika. What about zrikas hadam? Dlo ksiv bei ela kihuna. Zrikas hadam only says kihuna. It doesn't say anything about etzba. So based on that, I would assume that according to the Chachamim, Zrikas Hadam would have to be with the right hand. According to Reb Shimon, since it only says kihuna, it should be able to be done with the left hand as well. V'tanan, yeah, we learned in the Mishnah. Tosfos points out, he doesn't know where this Mishnah is. Zarek b'smol pasel, that if you do Zrikas Hadam with your left hand, it's pasel. V'lo palag Reb Shimon, but Reb Shimon does not argue. Reb Shimon does not argue. I would have expected Reb Shimon to argue and say it could even be kosher with your left hand, since all it says is kahuna. Abai says Abai palig b'braisa. Reb Shimon does in fact argue in a braisa actually, and therefore that clarifies his position here. The time that we learn in braisa, keep up a small puzzle, that if one receives the blood Kabbalah Sadam in the left hand puzzle, Reb Shimon machshir. Reb Shimon says kosher. Zarek b'small puzzle, Reb Shimon machshir. Also, if Zrika Sadam was done with the left hand puzzle, according to the Chacham, because it says Kohen there, but according to Reb Shimon, it would be kosher since Kohen alone does not require Zrika Sadam. What? Kohen, if the pasuk says Kohen alone, it does not require the right hand, and therefore the Zrika Sadam, according to Reb Shimon, could be done with the left hand as well. Friends, where are we? Where are we at in our journey? We are towards the end. We are basically tying up loose ends here. Where we have gotten to in this journey is that initially we had said that that a kohen needs to take the kometz with his right hand because it says, let's just say because it says small 4 times by the mitzorah. We ended up replacing that with a gezer shava, that there's this extra yamin by the oil of the mitzorah. It says yad there. It says yad essentially by the qemitzah, therefore it has to be with the right. So that was learned out from the Gzera Shava. But then we also said that, well, by qemitzah, it says yad, and therefore that's why it needs to be with, and that's how we know that it has to be with the right hand. Right? Well, actually, no. V'kometzing kohen. That because it says v'kometzing kohen, and because according to the Chacham it says kohen, that's enough to require the right hand. So therefore requires the right hand. So we basically have two drushes for why qemitzah needs to be with the right hand, either because of a gezer shava, or because it says v'kometzing kohen, And because it says kohen, that means the right hand, at least according to the Chachamim. So the question is, why do we need both of these drushes? So that's what we're going to answer now. Right, if we're learning out that the kometz is with the right hand because it says kohen, v'kometz kohen, and when it says kohen, it means right hand. Well, then when Rava said yad yad, the qemitzah lamali. When Rava had said that we have a gzera shava, that it says yad by the mitzorah and it says yad by qemitzah, to say that the kometz is with the right hand, why do we need that? We know that it's with the right hand because it says kohen. Mikihuna nafka. Right, after all, we're learning that because it says kohen. So chad le kometz v'chad le kiddush kometz. Well, there are two things. There are two things that we need to clarify the right-handness about. One is, right, we have the mixing bowl and we have the kometz bowl. Scooping up the kometz from the mixing bowl, so that requires your right hand. But also, depositing the kometz into the kometz bowl also requires your right hand. So therefore, we have two drushes. We have, whenever it says kohen, it requires your right hand. And also we have the yad yad, the gzer shava, to require your right hand. And that's because there are two steps that require the right hand. One is taking the kometz from the mixing bowl, and the other is depositing the kometz into the kometz bowl. So chad the kometz, one is for taking the actual kometz, v'chad the kiddush kometz, and one is for placing the kometz into the kometz bowl to be mekadesh the kometz there. Now, uli Reb Shimon, what about according to Reb Shimon, de lobai kiddush kometz? Right, we've learned about already in Masechtas Zvachim that according to Reb Shimon, you could take the kometz and just walk right up to the top of the mizbech and burn it on the mizbech. You don't actually need to put it into the kometz bowl. So if that's the case, then what do you need these drushes for? And even according to the opinion who says that according to Reb Shimon, you do need to deposit the kometz into a kometz bowl, but however, you would say that could be done with your left hand, so you don't actually need the right hand for that anyways. So yad yad de Rava lamali. Why do we need yad yad of Rava? Now remember, according to Reb Shimon, in order to require the right hand based on the, he says that you need etzba and kahuna, right? Kahuna alone, according to Reb Shimon, is not enough to require your right hand. Right, so the fact that it says, right, so the drasha of the fact that it says kohen in the pasuk by v'kamatza kohen, that's not going to require the right hand, because it only says kahuna. Now, in terms of the gzer shav of Rava of yad yad, what's Reb Shimon going to do with it? So either qemitzah gufa, if you're going to say, well, for the kometz itself, the Reb Shimon would still say that the kometz itself needs to be taken with the right hand. Well, no, he already knows that from somewhere else. Aliba de Reb Shimon midrab Yehuda bred Reb Chia nafka. He learns that out from Yehuda bred Reb Chia. The Amar Yehuda bred Reb Chia. My time with Reb Shimon. The Amar cried the pasuk is kodesh kodashim chatas v'chashim. Reb Shimon learns out from the pasuk by Menachos that says that it's kodesh kodashim like a chatos and like an asham. That the kometz of a mincha, right? Well, that a mincha is compared to a chatas as well as to an asham. But of the biyad of the biyamin kichatas, that if you're going to take the kometz and then just deliver it directly onto the mizbeach, you got to do it with your right hand like a chatos. But of the bekli, of the bismol, if you're going to do it with a vessel and put it into a kometz bowl, you can even do it with your left hand, kasham, like an asham. Lo nitzrucha ella. So one second. So, no, according to Reb Shimon, the fact that the kometz would be with the right hand, we already know from the fact that kodesh kodashim kachatas v'kashim, the comparison of a mincha to a chatas already would teach us that the kometz would have to be with the right hand. So what are you learning out from the gzer shav of yad yad, from the mitzvah, to say that it's the right hand? So el kometz the minchas chote. Well, for a minchas chote, Sagadati Chamina, we know that Reb Shimon's opinion is, however, Amar Reb Shimon shelo yeh korban u'mehuder. Reb Shimon had already said, as we learned out from the beginning of the parak. Oh no, not the beginning of the parak, but the beginning of this. Was it the beginning of this? Was it the beginning of this parak? Where was this from? No. There wasn't the. Oh, was it? No, this was from this Mishnah, right? I think. Where even are we? what page are we on? Where was this Mishnah? Well, it was already on Daf Vav. Yeah, so what was this? Yeah, that was this Mishnah, Daf Vav. Anyways, Reb Shimon pointed out that we don't want the minchas chote to be muhudar. That's why there's no oil. That's why there's no frankincense. So therefore, Hova Amr Reb Shimon Shuliyei Korbanu Miudar Ki Kometz Leinami B'Smol Tiskasha Kamashman. I may have thought that for a minchas chote, since we don't want it to be Miudar, maybe you can even take the kometz with your left hand. So therefore, we have the Gzer Shava to say that no, even by minchas chote, you gotta use your right hand for the kometz. Friends, that was Daf 10, Daf Yud of Masechta Menachos. Daf Yud was a journey with twists and turns to understand why does the kometz need to be taken with the right hand. The first Havamina that we had was to say that, well, because it says so many times, it reiterates so many times by the purification of Mitzorah that the oil by Mitzorah is with the left hand, to the exclusion of any other place where it says hand stam, and by a kometz it says hand stam, therefore it's going to be the right hand. That was replaced with Rava's Gezer Shava of Yad, because it says there's this extra Yamani when it comes to the oil of the Mitzorah, and that is to learn a Gezer Shava between Yad by Mitzorah and Yad by the Kometz, to say that is with the right, that the Kometz is going to be with the right hand, just like the bohen and ears of the Mitzorah. And that replaced the initial answer. Well, then what did we do with the extra smoles? Well, we said basically the whole version of the ani is basically to teach the chiddush of the two-tiered purification. Okay. Then we got to another explanation for why the kometz needs to be with the right hand, and that is because it says in the pasuk, right, v'kometz hakohen. And according to the Chacham, whenever you have a pasuk that says kohen, and it's by something that's ma'akev, the kapara, like a kometz, it means the right hand. So therefore the kometz needs to be with the right hand. But then we asked, wait, so why do we have two psukim to teach us the right hand by the kometz? Right, we have the Gzer Shavav Yad, and we also have the word Kohen. So he said, well, at least according to the Chachamim, so when it says, so one of them is to teach that the kometz itself needs to be with the right hand. The other one to teach is that you need to deposit into the kometz bowl with your right hand as well. Now, according to Reb Shimon, it's a little bit more complicated, because he learns out, first of all, he doesn't have the requirement of the kometz bowl, and even if he does, you can use your left hand for that. And the kometz, taking the kometz itself, was learned out from the comparison of kodesh kodashim kachatas v'koshim. So the word kohen is irrelevant, because he says that you need kohen and fingers. That's irrelevant. From the Gzer Shava, he learns out that even by minchas chote, which generally we don't want to be mifanek, and I might think that you can even use your left hand for that. No, comes the Gzer Shava to say you have to use your right hand for that as well. So friends, a few different angles on using the right hand for taking a kometz from a mincha. Friends, I hope you enjoyed yourselves on Daf Yud of Masechta Menachos. I'll catch you tomorrow. Cheers.